Well, this is Richard Roush. I'm going to give you some of my military history, how I become involved in military, and maybe a few of the things that took place during my military tour. I think to start this off, I should start back in the winter. I don't remember. It was before I graduated in 1941. There was a very important message by the president, and it was so important that they brought a radio into the assembly hall, which had never been done before. And Mr. Roosevelt, our president, said at that time, he said, "No American soldier will ever set foot on foreign soil." Well, I just took him at his word. So I knew that there would be no such thing as military. But anyway, I think even at that time, there were men that had been drafted. They sneaked the draft in pretty easy on them and said everybody has to serve a year. So there was a little song, it was quite popular. It's called, I think, "Be Back in a Year, Little Darling." And all the jukeboxes was playing that. But anyway, then as the year progressed along and we graduated, and I never gave it much thought because we'd hear of news here and there and elsewhere. And then in December of the 7th of 41, we had the fracas at Pearl Harbor, and that really put things to rolling. We knew something was going to happen. So in the meantime, I was hauling freight, and I continued to haul freight then till next, I believe it was August of 42. And I came home one evening and I had a letter from the government, and it said, "Greetings and salutations. Your friends and neighbors have selected you to appear at Martinsville at such and such a time, you know." Well, I had to register for the draft. And no, that letter came later on. I just got a letter that said I had to go register for the draft. Well, I registered for the draft, and then it wasn't but till December. I got a letter about October, and that's the one that said, "Greetings, your friends and neighbors have selected you." Oh dear. Anyway, I went to Martinsville on December the 10th, 42, and there I was to be transported by bus to the big armory on Pennsylvania Street, South Pennsylvania Street in Indianapolis, and there be inducted into the military, pass my physical and all of that. Well, my gracious, it was cold, I'm telling you, and we got in there, and the first thing you do in a situation like this is you disrobe down to nothing but a smile, and then you start going from one station to another. I mean, like through a room or in a room and out of a room, and in there they check you for hemorrhoids and for hernia. But it seems like they was more interested in crabs, body lice, and VD than there was anything else. So after we harangued around with all of that for a while, they gave us back our clothes, I believe it was, and then we went to dinner. And oh, what a horrible dinner. Macaroni and tomatoes. Of course, they knew most all us boys was poor anyway, and as Was used to the kind of poor food, so it didn't hurt nothing. And after we got through with dinner, then it was back into the same routine, off with your clothes again. And you took a urine sample, and I think one of the most outstanding tests that we had to take was a heart. Let a doctor listen to your heart. And here stood this doctor in a doorway, and he had his stethoscope plugged in one ear, and that's all. The other one was down on his neck. And he would hit you on the chest with that stethoscope, and he said, "My, another fine, healthy American lad," and all of that, you know. Well, sure, if a guy was upright walking, he was healthy. And then you passed your hearing test, and my God, from just first ear, one ear and then the other, you could have, well, it was just a terrible noise. It was so loud. If you couldn't have heard it, you could have felt the vibration from the noise. So that, you passed that. And then the sight test, I'll tell you, a man at 10 feet, if he could see a letter 3 feet high, hell, he was in. It wasn't much of a test. As they say, if you could hear it thunder and see it lightning and was standing, you was in. And that's about right. But then we were instructed to put our clothes back on. And it was so cold in that old building, we were just blue. Gosh, it was cold. I'll bet you it wasn't much over 35 degrees in there. It's just so damn cold. We was all just really suffering. And then they run us into a room, and they swore us in. I think out of the whole day's episode, there was only 2 men that didn't pass the exam. And I wouldn't have bet on them living through the night. They was such bad shape. There was a lot of weak, weary, and sickly people in there. But anyway, they run us in this room, and we had to raise our right hand, and they swore us in. And they said, now, to make this really official, we have to read certain articles called Articles of War to you. And once you've had these articles written to you, if you suddenly take a notion that you ain't coming back or you're going over the hill, then we can do anything to you that we so desire. But without this choice bit of ceremony, you're home free. Well, a lot of the guys had been sworn in the past, but they hadn't read the Articles of War to them, so they couldn't persecute them once they caught them. But they had us. They said, now, we've got one more thing. You can either stay right here and wait on the military bus and go out to Fort Harrison and just stay in the Army, or you can take a 7-day furlough and go home. I took the 7-day furlough. I came back on the 17th. So I went out to Fort Harrison immediately, and they assigned me to a barracks, but we had no clothing. And they had told us to bring very, very light clothing, so if they had to mail it home, they could all get it in a certain size box with their shoes, you know, and they mail it all in one lump sum, or you could give it all to the Salvation Army or this whatnot, someplace that you could get rid of it. Anyway, I sent mine home after I got my clothes, and immediately you were issued a handbook called the Soldier's Handbook, TM 100. TM meant Training Manual number 100, and if I'm not mistaken, you turn to page 110, and on this particular page there was 10 orders called the General Orders. Let's see, I forget how it went. Walk my post in a military manner and talk to no one except the post commander or something. And I don't know, I think number 7 was talk to no one except in the line of duty. That is when you're on guard duty. But the reason this was stressed so, you had to know these general orders, and you had to know them. If a guy said, give me number 9, you had to quote it to him right there on the spot. And our company commander, or our first sergeant in this company I was in, was an old company commander in World War I. And he was then a first sergeant, so he was a little upset with the fact that they had demoted him to top kick. And if he come in the barracks, which he come in a multitude of times, and if you wasn't reading your handbook, you was immediately put on extra duty of some kind, KP or something, guard duty, what have you. But anyway, I hadn't been there too long, and they were asking for anyone that would like to be a pilot. Oh my goodness, pilot would be great, you know, get out of this chicken outfit. And I started to volunteer, and this one old guy, I said old guy, he's about 28. He kind of took up with me. He said, don't volunteer for anything. He'd been in before. Well, I let that go, and about 20 minutes in came the same guy, and he said, anybody in here would like to be a truck driver? Well, I already was one. I started to volunteer, and he said, lay off of that. Well, they took about 10 guys out there for truck drivers. And then, a few minutes later, we had to leave the barracks, and we seen what the deal was. The pilots were piling snow up into piles with big shovels, and the truck drivers were hauling it away in great big two-wheel carts. So I was catching on pretty fast what was going on. And I believe we left the fort on a Saturday. Anyway, maybe it was late Friday evening. They run us down and give us our issue of clothing. My God, I never had such bad fitting. I wore 8.5 shoes, and I come out of the 10.5 shoe. I said, these are too damn big, and they said, they won't be when your feet swell. My God, my foot had to swell 3 inches, you know, to take up the slack in that boot. But anyway, I raced back to the barracks, and being so cold, why, I started with long underwear. I put my long underwear on, and time I got all dressed up, I had to go to the latrine. Well, that latrine was about 300 feet down the company street. In this particular army I was in, we had barracks, and then we had latrines. We didn't have the same facility in the building with us. So down there I went, and I stepped up to the urinal, and there was no fly in my drawers. Well, I couldn't find it, and I dropped my pants, and I was looking at my drawers from the backside, and the guy asked me, he said, hell you looking for? And I said, these damn drawers ain't got any fly in them. He said, well, hell no, you dumb butt, you got them on backwards. So it's back to the barracks, and I start all over again. And I thought that's kind of funny, that underwear, I just put them on, they was buttoned up, and I put them on, and that's just the way I wore them. I never had to button them, so I never looked at any buttons. But then Saturday, after supper, they told us to pack up all our trash, and we got our clothes mailed out to come back home. And they said, get ready, because we're going, after supper, we're going down to the railroad yard and get on the train, because they'd already called our name to prepare to go someplace on the train. Well, we fell out about 8 o'clock at night, marched about a half a mile down there, carrying them old duffel bags, and, well, we had A bags and B bags in, didn't have a duffel bag. Got all situated. We stood in line till 2 o'clock the next morning. And by God, it was really cold. And I had a bottle of aftershave lotion in my toilet kit. And damn if it didn't freeze and break right there. I had to take pretty good cold weather to freeze aftershave lotion. And we got on that old train. Oh, what a miserable trip. And the ticket that I had, they give me, it said, Pullman to Texas. My God, they wasn't a Pullman in a whole train. So we started out, and they just feed us once a day. When we finally got to Texas, I don't know, it seemed to me like it was Tuesday morning about 2 o'clock. My, what a miserable trip. But I was tickled to death to be in Texas, and I thought, boy, this is really something. I always wanted to go to Texas, and there I was looking out the window, and everything began to look pretty strange to me by the time I got into Oklahoma. But I just still didn't know where we was at, and nobody would tell you. So we got into this Camp House, Texas, and it was located 6 miles north of a town called Gainesville, right really on the banks of the Red River, just across from Oklahoma. And they loaded us in trucks from the train and hauled us to a bunch of old barracks. And of course it was all organized. And immediately after we got in there, here they come, they check you for crabs and gonorrhea. I thought, what the hell do these people do? That's every time you stop, you got to drop your drawers. And went through that routine, checked her mouths, looked under her arms, and got her clothes back on and rearranged. Picked up her trash and stand there holding it, their barracks bags. And they'd call off names, get in truck number so-and-so, and some more names, get in truck number so-and-so. And finally, we was down to there was just 2 or 3 of us guys left. We went out and got in this truck. As I walked around, I seen on the bumper, it says 84 DIV. And I said to that truck driver, I said, this ain't the Air Corps, is it? He said, it damn sure ain't, boy. This is the 84th Infantry. Well, then what they was doing, they was getting us assigned to a truck. And now we had to go to one big mess hall. The trucks waited on us. And they fed us. And they fed us 2 pieces of cold liver and a half a cup of cold coffee. Well, I don't care for either one. I flat just almost refused to eat the damn liver, but I hadn't had nothing to eat for so long. And I thought, my God, this is awful. But I found out that was one of the better meals served in this chicken outfit. And back in the trucks, and they hauled us over to a barracks and dumped us out, and there was a sergeant there. He said, go down to this building and draw your bedding. So we went down to this building, and we got a bed and mattress cover and a pillowcase and pillow cover and other bed clothes, some extra blanket or 2. Got everything all set up. Hell, by that time, it was time to get up, because that damn outfit, they always got up at 3:45. And the routine was, just the first day or 2, just learning how to put on your clothes and learning a few commands and how to get your leggings on. We had lace-up leggings. And they laid out our equipment, what was issued, and it wouldn't pass. They wanted a special kind of a aluminum container to put a little stick of Williams shaving soap in, so you could use your shaving brush. There's only 2 or 3 guys out of the whole outfit had them, so we was restricted till one of the guys said, I think I can get some from Pennsylvania, so he sent back to a drug company in Pennsylvania, or soap company, and we got that. Well, that just shows you how damn chicken an officer can be, especially a dumb one that don't know what the hell's going on anyway. But then after we learned to kind of put our clothes on, and we were introduced to this sergeant. His name was Nadon. He was a French Canadian, and we found out later on he was a hell of a nice old guy, but boy, I'm telling you, from 3:45 to retreat, he was the sergeant. He would talk to you other than after retreat. He would talk to you a little bit. If he caught you in town, he'd even buy you a beer. But other than that, he was the sergeant. And you better not forget that. Well, he spoke with a funny brogue because he was a French Canadian, a dental technician, had worked in New York a lot. And when he would call you to attention, he'd just say platoon or whatever he happened to have, or company or detachment or detail or something. And he'd call you to attention, and then he'd holler right face or left face, whatever that was. But then he'd say forward, push. Well, the first time he said that to us, some of them stood there, some of them walked over one another. They just didn't know what the hell was going on. So he got us all straightened up again, got us back to attention. And he said, now, I'll tell you, when I say forward push, you better shake your goddamn ass. And that's just what he meant. Well, as soon as we learned his dialect, well, we could handle it pretty good. And I remember one of the things that we done right at the beginning was we picked up our dress hat, our fatigue hat, our helmet liner, and then our steel helmet. And for 3 damn days, we put our helmet and our helmet liner and all them other hats on and off all day long. I'm telling you, I never got so damn tired. They didn't have anything else for us to do, so that's a real neat trick. Spend 8 or 10 hours a day putting your hat on. And then we began to get into a little close order drill, and it was, I don't think we'd been in there but probably 5 or 6 days to where we had made one march 10 miles. And the major, his name was MacArthur, Charles MacArthur. And he's a real Georgia horse's butt. He was really trying to make out with us guys. In one respect, he wanted us to put some confidence in him. And he told us, he said, now, I want you to think of me as your father. And if any of you have any problems come up, like a death at home or anything like that, said, you see me. Said, I'll do everything I can to make sure that you go home. So, sure enough, it wasn't but a few days, you know, a crowd of being that big, there's always somebody at home dying. One of the boys went to him, told him, he said, I've just got to go. Said, I believe it was his mother or something that was dying, or had already died, and he needed a few days off to go to the funeral. And we found out what kind of a guy he was. The old bastard put him on extra duty. And that was just the beginning. Then we all kind of steered shy of that guy. We'd all seemed like we was all country boys, and we'd take a guy at face value until he proved himself otherwise. And then when he proved himself otherwise, we really put him on the list. But it wasn't long till we could run the 10 miles, and then we was making 40-mile hikes. And in the meantime, they weren't feeding us. I weighed 188 stripped when I arrived, and I came home on furlough 5 months later. I weighed 157 fully clothed. Oh my, I was so poor, so hungry. And like for breakfast, we would get just a tablespoon of powdered eggs, a tablespoon of powdered or dehydrated potatoes. And you could put all that on an ordinary slice of bread easily. And then the Army baked the bread in round loaves that was about 7 or 8 inches across. And they'd cut that bread in two, and then they would slice it. You get a slice of bread that was about 3.5 inches long, about 2 inches tall, and that was your breakfast with a half a cup of coffee. And dinner was probably the same type of potatoes when you got a spoonful of stew, and coffee, and a piece of bread. And supper was usually about the same thing. Well, I'll tell you, you didn't gain any weight, because we got up at 3:45 and we went to bed at 11:45. Now there's an unwritten law, well, maybe it's still in the Army, I know it was then, that if on any occasion you're still on duty at midnight in the Army, and then they say that the detail is finished, whatever your daily routine or whatever it was, you'd get off at 12:30. Then you don't have to get up until noon the next day. Well, by working you at 11:45, they could get you back up in 4 hours. But in the meantime, on this 4 hours, you had to do your laundry and letter writing and everything else, you know, and you just so damn tired you just couldn't hardly do anything. And they were charging us $1.50 a month for laundry, but the Army's got a unique way of making sure you don't turn in much for laundry. When you were issued your clothes, you were issued 3 dress socks, 3 work socks, 2 pair of boots, one pair of leggings, and then you had your 2 pair of fatigues, 2 pair of khakis, and 2 pair of wool pants, and likewise with the shirts. Now, everything that you had, one of everything has to be left ready for display. So you had 1 pair of long handles, then you had your shorts, you just had 3 pairs of shorts, 3 tops, and everything of that type, well, and 3 handkerchiefs. Well, when you cut down your socks, you just got 2 socks, and you'll have one of them on, and you've got 2 pair of underwear with one of them on, and then that leaves you 1 shirt and 1 pair of pants. God damn, you're in trouble, and you got to be clean all the time. So a lot of times when we'd come in at 11:45, we just take off for the shower, and we would wash our clothes, and them still on us. And finally, you know, you just shower as fast as you could and wash yourself and your clothes, and gracious, shave. So that you lost another 45 minutes there getting all your gear ready. So a lot of them began to get wise. They would buy extra socks and extra underwear, and that helped. But then when you had to put all that stuff in a certain type of container, when you shipped out, then you was at it again, you know. So no way to beat them. I tried every way in the world to get the upper hand on this bunch of clowns, but you just couldn't do it. And I found out early in my career that now that I was a medic, even though I was a medic with the infantry, no one liked you, because it seemed as though you were always causing somebody embarrassment by making them drop their pants for a short arm, or you was giving them shots, something such as that. And Furthermore, we were not a group of men that had any kitchen of our own, so they assigned us so many to eat with each company. Well, I found out that that didn't go too good with them either, because they would only let us medics eat when all the rest of the troops had went through, and even a lot of them went through for seconds. If there was that much food, then they would get a whack, and all we got was just table scraps. I never was very fond of table scraps, and as we become better acquainted, I would tell the mess sergeant, I said, he take a little better care of us medics and treat us like the rest of the troops, or when it comes time for your weekly kitchen inspection, you'll never pass it, because we will tell the old man that you're a horse's ass and you're trying to starve us. And that worked a little bit, but we found out also that the mess sergeant couldn't do much either, because we truly had nothing to eat. He had no rations. Now the company that we eat with, or the one I eat with, he would draw 60 pounds of sugar for 180 men every 10 days. Now there's not very much you can do with that. When the old mess sergeant cooked pancakes, he had some pretty good looking pancakes. But when you say, "Hey Sarge, where's the syrup?" and he said, "Right here," and he would put grapefruit juice on your pancakes. Now, I don't like grapefruit juice any damn way you fix it, and especially when you've ruined 2 or 3 of my pancakes, I just really get upset. But this will kind of give you an idea of how we were treated. And this food when we went out on the field was just atrocious. There's no way to describe it. It was so bad. Not so much bad as it just wasn't no quantity at all. One time I was a first aid man with 3 companies at the rifle range. Well, all the companies, they brought their mess out with them, so they could feed all 3 companies. And I hurried up when the first company opened up for chow. I jumped in the chow line. I eat with them. And by then the next company was starting to feed. I got in with them. I eat with all 3 companies, and had started back through the first company for seconds before I got caught. Now, that'll give you an idea. If a man's not getting too damn much to eat, if he can eat 3 meals and still going for the 4th one. So I think that was really my biggest gripe. We always had good service with mail, and we had very little money. Of course, we didn't need any money. A lot of things could have been a lot better, but what they was trying to do was to get us tough. And the one thing that I really got upset with the officers over, and including my own medical officers, was a thing they call water discipline. There's no way that a man should have been treated the way we were treated. When we would leave the barracks, going on maybe a 3 or 5 or 10-day jaunt, you'd fill your canteen to the brim, and there would be no water at the mess hall. We had a thing called a Lister bag. It was just a rubber bag with metal spigots on it. That, I say, would hold probably 25, maybe 30 gallons of water. I never seen one of them full. Never seen one with more than 10 gallons in it, I don't think. But anyway, we would march maybe the 40 miles, and we'd bivouac. And as soon as we get in there, why, you'd have to dig a hole, and you're taking this water like it was cough medicine. And in Texas there, my God, it's over 100, because it would only cool down to like 96 in the wee hours of the morning. No supper yet. They'd wait till it get dark, so they would feed you supper from 10:30 to 11 at night, and you'd get such a little and nothing in the Lister bag, and maybe a half a cup of coffee. Well, you had to go to eat your mess and wash your gear, and then you had to go back at 1 o'clock the next morning for breakfast. No liquid, and you'd get a hell of a poor meal, just hardly nothing. No water, half a cup of coffee, but you had to go for breakfast to get your dinner. And your dinner would consist of 2 of those famous little slices of bread. And I thought it was quite a feat when Christ fed the multitude with the 5 loaves and the fish. But this damn mess sergeant, he could take a 3-ounce jar of jelly and feed a whole damn army with it. He'd just stick a knife straight in, pull it straight out, and wipe it on one of them pieces of bread. And you'd get that, and then he put a real thin slice of cheese, 1 inch square, on the other side. And he'd hand you that with a damned old apple or an old orange that there's no damn way you could eat. And that was your dinner. And this water discipline would go on. You'd get water then. You'd get a chance at some water on the 3rd day. That quart of water had to run you 3 days. And I've seen men keel over with the heat. There's a lot of people just flat can't take it. And lay on the ground with their tongue hanging out and pant like a dog and die. I just was horrified. Of course, there's nothing you could do. If you squawked, hell, they have you drawn and quartered right on the spot, you know. They get you for every damn thing you can think of. But it's just damn horrible to see a man die, and all he died for was the want of water. And I just never could understand their damn philosophy on that. Maybe sometime. And the rations, like I say, were so poor that at one time when we was in camp, I volunteered to drive a chow truck with the sole purpose in mind of stealing something from me and my boys, my buddies, to eat, you know. And I'll be damned if they didn't put a lieutenant on my truck with a carbine, a loaded gun. Well, when we went to the place where what they call the breakdown, where the quartermaster brings in the food, and it's broke down, and each company is divided up right there. For our battalion, that's 3,035 men in a battalion, we received 1 side of beef. Well, I'll tell you, you can't even make soup out of that. That's probably no more than 300 pounds, 200 pounds of meat, just a side of beef. You didn't get anything. God. So I just finally delivered what little we had and took the truck back to the motor pool and come back very disgusted. But things progressed along, and I got a chance to be a Jeep driver. They had started the motor pool up, and the first time that they'd went out on a convoy, I think they had something like 60 trucks in this convoy, and they wrecked 40 of them. Well, it's very simple how they wrecked them. Most of the people driving the trucks, the Jeeps and whatnot, were office help in civilian life. There wasn't a truck driver amongst them. So there was a memorandum came down, and it said, in order to form the motor pool, all men that's going to drive in this division is going to be a truck driver. Well, that was really great. And being a medic, while we had on our table of operations one Jeep and one trailer, and the rest of it was on foot. And we later received a 3/4 ton truck to haul the knocked down aid station. No, we had two Jeeps, two trailers for a battalion aid station, and then they finally gave us a 3/4 ton truck. And so I got to drive the Jeep, and I'll say this about that little Jeep. That is absolutely the best, most durable vehicle that the Army has ever had, and I think they'll regret it by changing the model on it and doing away with it. They finally just phased it out. But it was really a hell of a good vehicle. You could do so many things with it, and if you got stuck, 4 or 5 guys could run out there and just straight arm it right out of a mud hole. If you turned it over, of course it'd break the windshield and kind of bend the steering gear a little on it, and this, that, and the other, but it didn't hurt nothing. You could just flip it back up on the wheels. And I turned one over 3 different times. And anyway, when we got the motor pool going, this old sergeant that was teaching us, he was from North Carolina. And after we'd run a pretty stiff course, and he'd watch us. I mean, like pulling just almost straight up. And if a guy just laid his foot on the floor and over-revved the engine, and like he told us, he said the engine is long stroke and pull at minimum RPM, he began to weed them out. And after he got them all weeded out, why, he called us together, and he said, "I think that every one of you guys are good drivers," and he said, "Let's have some fun. Let's run some jackrabbits." Well, I'll tell you, that was the most fun, running jackrabbits with a Jeep. Old jackrabbits can really get out and get with it, and they just go from one clump of rocks to another, and we'd have to be awful careful in that tall Johnson grass, because some of them big old rugged jagged rocks would stick up 3 or 4 feet, and it's just curtains if you hit one of them, But things just kept progressing along, and of course, although I was a Jeep driver, I still had to do company duty. I wasn't associated then with the riflemen like the rest of the medics. I was in the aid station group, but I know one time, every Saturday, they got into a habit. Every Saturday morning, instead of pulling a full field inspection inside the barracks, we would just roll up a full field pack, and we'd walk 12 miles out, 12 miles back, and then we'd have the afternoon off. Well, they'd done that about 3 or 4 Saturdays in a row, so I went down to mess hall, and I got myself 2 number 10 tin cans, and I rolled my blanket and shelter half around those tin cans, because I didn't really like to carry all that other trash, underwear and extra pants and tent pegs and everything. And I'll be dipped. The morning we got out there was about 6 of us, and they started counting off, and I said, "Oh hell, we're gonna pitch tents and lay out a full field display." So I just had to stand there. And the sergeant, he come along and said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I haven't got my equipment." Well, they went ahead and had their full field, and they passed the word on clear down to the colonel. And the colonel said, "Send them back." So we went back after our equipment, got all of our equipment, come back, and we laid out our display. And as soon as we got the display laid out, we just rolled it right back up and started back to camp. Well, we got to do 48 miles. The other guys just got to do 24. And I told them guys, I said, I don't give a damn if we just move 10 feet. I'm taking it all. So it just kind of gives you an idea how a guy's always trying to connive, and once in a while he can second guess them and get away with it. But most of the time, you just can't do it. Well, we were down here at this beautiful camp house, and this was my first encounter with gumbo mud. I'd heard gumbo, but I never really got involved with it. This particular time, I had about 1,200 pounds in that little quarter-ton trailer behind this Jeep, and I had about 400 or 500 pounds of stuff in the Jeep, and the troops took off down a fire break, and that was the only way that I could follow them with the Jeep. Well, I pulled in to an old barnyard drive and right on out into this, of course, on this reservation. They tore the house and the barn down and everything. And I took off down this fire break, and I noticed, my goodness, it was pulling terrible. So I throwed her low range and went to first gear, and I hadn't went over 75 feet till I started spinning. And I stopped and got out. I thought maybe I got tangled up in some wire or something. And the wheels were completely locked on my trailer. So I took the shovel off of the tool kit on the side of the Jeep, and I dug the mud out from under the fenders, and I started again. And I went just about 2 turns of the wheels, and I stuck again. I wasn't cutting in but about 4 inches. Well, in the meantime, I'm packing up underneath the fenders on my Jeep till I'd have to dig the mud out from underneath the fenders. And I finally got over in a little place where it's a little bit grassy, and I got a little speed up, but I still couldn't get enough speed to sling the mud off the wheels. And when I reached the end of that fire break, it was 4 miles through there. I had spun the wheels 16 miles. That'll just give you a little idea what kind of a vehicle this Jeep was. Most of the time I was outside pushing. Just pull the throttle out and just let it run, you know. And kept the hood up on it. Of course, it would never get hot. I had the hood up till the wheels got to slinging mud up and was throwing it on the motor. So I put the hood back down, and I was trying to take care of it. But I finally, when I came back, I came another way. And that was my first encounter with gumbo mud. Now, a man walking in gumbo, after just a few steps, his feet's about 18 inches around. And he can't walk very far till he's completely exhausted. If you're walking on just a muddy road, to my amazement, I found out that some way or another your foot will throw the mud up on the back of your leg, and the first thing you know, you got mud clear to the back of your neck. I just couldn't believe that. But you learn a lot of silly stuff, and you learn to sleep in sitting position, or leaning, if you can find something to lean against. And I never was so miserable most of the time, tired and hungry. And I never had, up till this time, I had never seen anybody walk and sleep. But lots and lots of times, if we were really on the move day and night, which they'd done to us a lot of times, they just moved us around the clock. We never got to sleep or nothing. At 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, they'd say, fall out. And, you know, we would have to run and catch the men in the front of the platoon and stop them. And stop them and shake them and say, and tell them that we was going to take a break, and the very next breath, they would be snoring again. I never seen nothing like it. I could go to sleep pretty quick. I can go to sleep even yet today. From the time you turn a light out, I can be snoring. My wife has to cover me up even. But you learn from being so fatigued that you don't have to have no sleeping pills or nothing. You can just bed right down. And there in Texas, we was always sleeping with a bunch of snakes. I rolled one up in my pack one night, what they called a ground moccasin, and let him out the next day. He was flittering dead. But you never knew what you was bedding down with. And I finally worked it around to where in June, when I got a chance to come home, a while ago I said I'd lost so much weight. I really had, but in June I came home and got married. And what little time I was home, I gained 11 pounds. God, that was really great. You get to eat something. Somebody passed you something and you could eat it. Take all you wanted. It was really, really great. But then I went back to camp, and my wife came back with me. Came down to see me a month or so after I'd been there. And I tried to get her to stay up here, but she wouldn't take no advice. She was damn poor, I'm telling you, didn't have nothing. And she stayed with me till I left for Louisiana on maneuvers. That was really an ordeal. When we left Camp House, Texas, going to Marysville, Louisiana, was where we used to bed down. It was 70 miles to Dallas. And you know, I run that poor old Jeep in low and in second and then stop for about, I guess, 60 miles, 65. And then all at once the convoy began to move, and I seen there wasn't nothing left, only flat out. I just had to run her wide open. I never went through Dallas so fast in my life. I thought a few times the way we were loaded, that on some of those turns, it's just more than that old Jeep could handle. And it seems so funny that a Texas Ranger would be in one intersection giving me double time, and down at the next intersection it'd be a Dallas policeman giving me double time. That was really a way to travel. And as soon as we got back out of town, about 2-3 miles, it's back in low gear again. I never got into such a damn pokey convoy in all my life. We drove 200 miles in 28 hours. God, what a long time to be a driving and go no place. But then after we got down into Marysville, got established. By that I mean it was raining. And they let us hook tents together. You could actually hook 4 shelter halves together and make a fairly nice tent out of it. So there was about 8 of us bedded down in this tent of 4 shelter halves. And then we got run out of that due to wet weather. And then me and another guy, I didn't know who in the hell he was, we pitched our own tent on a little bit higher ground, And I dug a hole on the inside the tent and threw the dirt up, so the dirt or the rain would have to get up, water would have to get up pretty deep on the outside before it come in. And one night, just kind of sleeping in a sitting position anyway, and I heard this guy, he's moaning. Oh, he was carrying on. I said, hell, this damn guy's having a fit of some kind. So I turned my flashlight on, and the water had came over and came through the dirt that we had stacked up on the inside of this tent. And it was in November. God, it was cold. It was running right down his neck. And that's why he was hollering and carrying on. And I just grabbed my blanket and what few belongings I had. And I had an extra shelter hat. And I just eased out of there and waded out to a little higher ground and sat down on the helmet and put my shelter half over me with my blanket in my arms. And it wasn't long till I got he's coming out of there. I'm telling you, he's like a water buffalo. He's just a floundering and a thrashing. It was 75 gallons of ice water in that hole with him. If I'd have known him a little better and liked him a little better, I'd have probably woke him up. But other than that, I just let the water wake him up. And I'll tell you, that Louisiana maneuvers was really something. That's the first time in my life I ever was hung up going straight down a hill. I never believed that. So I hung up so tight it took a 1.5 ton truck to pull me downhill. But we survived that. That maneuvers was really, I'd say, as close to combat as you could get without somebody shooting at you. Trying to stay hid and using your camouflage, and keeping supplies going, and hauling in wounded and this, that, and the other, and crossing rivers and crossing creeks. And I knew, I'd seen it done before, that you could take the tarpaulin off of a 2.5 ton truck and let 2 men hold one edge of it right against the riverbank, and 2 or 4 men carry the rest of that tarpaulin out, let it float on top of the water, and carry it out into the river, you know, like saying the water was 4 feet deep, and just drive a Jeep right out on that tarpaulin. Now, it just gets a little bit silly when you do that, but you can do it. And when you get him out there in the middle of that tarpaulin, just bring all the edges in and wrap them around that old Jeep, and it'll float it. It'll actually float it. You've got you a boat. And we learned to take a 1/4 ton trailer and make a boat out of it. We could make that go across the creek or a river. It'll haul 6 men, easy. And there's things such as that we acquired that we hadn't known. It was just giving you on-hands experience. And we took a 2.5 ton truck and backed it right up to a bluff. And this bluff was about 40 feet high. And we put 1-inch hay rope around the back duals and put the rope up on top of the bluff and tied it to 2 big strong trees and drove that truck right up, made the rear wheels act as a winch. And I wouldn't have thought that could have been done either. But there's a lot of things that you can do if you have just a little bit of equipment, you know, ropes and axes. And one time they sent me and an Indian to move a 1/2 ton Dodge 4-wheel drive, and they only had 3 wheels. And I said, my goodness, Chief, we've got a problem here if we ain't got an axe. But they left us an axe and a piece of rope. So we cut a pole and we jacked up that axle and put some rocks under it so we get it off the wheel. And then we put the pole down in underneath that axle and roped it to the side of the truck. And there was an old crescent wrench in the toolbox, and that was all they left. And I adjusted the brakes out to where it almost locked the wheel on that one that was off, you know. Put that old truck in four-wheel drive and just brought him right on in on that. By locking the brakes, it made that other wheel pull too, see? So we had 3 live wheels. Oh, you just learn all kinds of stuff. But that Indian was the best guy I was ever with when it comes to being in the woods. He was a Seminole. And he could just look at a mud hole and tell you whether there's a snake in it or how deep it was. Never seen nothing like him. And a pretty good mechanic. Cynthia had sent me a 2-layer chocolate cake. And it was, you know, it was one of them just scrumptious cakes. And I couldn't eat it. It was mashed to where it's just about as thick as 3/8 plywood. And I tried and tried and tried, and I said, "Chief, you want to try this cake?" And he said, "Yeah, I can eat that cake." And he just cut it in ribbons, like noodles, and he just put a strip of that